The year was 1872. The place was Wyoming territory, high up where the wind never stops talking and the snow comes early. It was the kind of cold that stole your breath and turned metal brittle. The stagecoach, painted a hopeful yellow, was already struggling in the ruts of the frozen track, the horses blowing steam like engines. They were 3 days out from South Pass, pushing north when the world splintered apart. The first shot was a crack that sounded just like the ice breaking on the river, but this was rifle fire. Wood exploded from the driver's box. The man screamed, a high, thin sound that the wind snatched right up. The coach pitched, a sickening lurch that threw the passengers into a pile. Clara Greeley was in that pile, her shoulder jammed against the sharp corner of a locked chest. She heard the men outside, their voices ragged with desperation. "Stop the team! Stop 'em or we'll kill the lot!" The coach shuddered to a halt. The door was ripped open. The cold, which had been just a nuisance, became a predator. It poured into the cab, along with 2 men whose faces were wrapped in wool scarves, only their eyes showing. They were mean eyes. "Get out! All of you! Hands high!" There was a drummer, a man in a fine suit who smelled of whiskey, and an older woman clutching a carpet bag. They stumbled out, hands raised. Clara moved last. She was slow, hampered by the heavy wool of her dress and the secret she carried beneath it. She was 5 months gone with child, and the fall had sent a sharp, terrifying pain through her belly. "The strongbox! Driver!" one of the men yelled. "He's hit!" another voice called back. "He ain't talking." The man who had opened the door looked at the passengers. "He give you the key?" The drummer shook his head, his face pale. We don't know nothing." The outlaw cursed. He saw the locked chest inside the coach, the one Clara had been thrown against. "That it?" "That's private luggage," the drummer protested. The outlaw raised his pistol and struck the man across the face. The sound was a wet smack. The drummer fell into the snow, moaning. Clara froze. She knew that sound, the sound of a man's power hitting flesh. "Get it out." While the second man dragged the chest onto the trail, the leader looked Clara up and down. His eyes lingered on her belly. "Well, what we got here? You ain't gonna be much trouble, are you, ma'am?" He reached out, his glove rough, and touched her cheek where a bruise was already forming. It was then that the shooting started again. But this time, it wasn't the outlaws. It was the shotgun guard, the one they'd thought was the driver. He'd been thrown clear into the pines, and he'd gotten his nerve back. A blast of scattershot ripped through the air. One of the outlaws grabbing the team horses screamed and fell. Clara did not think. She did not plan. The man in front of her turned toward the sound of the gun, and in that second, Clara ran. She scrambled up the bank, into the dense brush of lodgepole pine. The snow was knee-deep. It was like running in wet sand. Her lungs burned. She heard another shot and another scream. She did not look back. She fell, her hands sinking into the freezing powder, and pushed herself back up. The pain in her belly was a dull, constant ache now, but the terror was sharper. She just ran, following the line of the ridge, away from the sounds of men killing each other. She ran until she could not hear the guns. She ran until she could not feel her feet. And then, when the adrenaline finally left her, she fell into a drift beside a spine of gray rock and did not get up. The world went quiet, the snow falling heavy now, covering her like a shroud. A crimson smear on her temple, where she'd hit the chest, was the only color against the white. Holt was traveling north because north was the only direction left. He had no destination. He was just moving, letting the cold seep into him, hoping it might freeze the thing in his gut that wouldn't die. He'd been a bounty hunter. He had been good at it, too good. And then, in Texas, he had brought in a boy, barely 17. The boy had surrendered. He'd dropped his gun and had his hands in the air. And Holt, seeing the face of the man the kid had killed, had pulled the trigger anyway. He hadn't touched a firearm since He sold his horse in Cheyenne. He was on foot, walking away from himself. He found the stagecoach wreckage first. It was a mess. The driver and the guard were dead. The horses were gone. 3 bodies lay in the snow. The drummer, the old woman, and one of the outlaws. All of them stripped of their boots and coats. Vultures, the 2-legged kind, had already been there. Holt felt nothing. It was just another ugly picture in a world full of them. He was about to move on, heading for the high country, when he saw the tracks. 1 person, scrambling up the bank. The tracks were clumsy, deep, desperate. He followed them, not out of charity, but almost from habit. You follow a trail. That's what you do. He found her a mile up the ridge. He almost missed her. She was just a lump of dark wool, already half buried by the new snow. He thought she was dead. He rolled her over, and a small, pained breath escaped her lips. Her face was a mask of cold, blue-white, with a dark, ugly bruise swelling on her temple. She was young, and, he saw, she was with child. Holt cursed, low and soft. This was trouble. This was the last thing he wanted. He looked north, toward the mountains. He looked south, back toward the wreckage. He could just walk away. It was cleaner. He stood there for a full minute, the snow gathering on his hat brim. Then, with a sigh that turned to a cloud of white, he bent down. He slid one arm under her back, the other under her knees, and lifted her. She weighed almost nothing. He shifted her weight, settled her against his chest, and began to walk. He knew a place, an old trapper's cabin from years ago, a place he'd used when he was hunting a different kind of prey. It was ruined, but it had a roof. It was 2 miles deeper into the foothills. He put his head down against the wind and carried her. Clara woke up in pieces. First, the pain, her head, her shoulder, a deep, cold ache in her womb that made her want to curl up and die. Second, the smell, wood smoke, dust, and something else, something rank, like old pelts. Third, the sound, a man clearing his throat. Her eyes snapped open. She was not in the snow. She was on a cot, a filthy, straw-stuffed thing. A rough wool blanket, stiff as dried leather, was over her. The cabin was small, 1 room. Light came from a single, dirt-caked window and the fire crackling in a stone hearth. And the man, he was sitting on a crate near the fire, his back to her. He was large. His shoulders filled out the worn canvas jacket. He was sharpening a skinning knife on a whetstone. The sound was a rhythmic, metallic shing-shing-shing that set her teeth on edge. She tried to sit up, and a wave of dizziness washed over her. She fell back with a gasp. The sound of the knife stopped. Slowly, the man turned. He was not one of the robbers. His face was different. It was a hard face, carved from wood, with a thick beard that needed trimming and pale eyes that looked right through her. He was maybe 40, maybe 50. It was hard to tell. The land had worn him down. "Where am I?" Clara whispered. Her voice was a dry croak. The man looked at her. He did not smile. He did not scowl. He just looked. You, Ed, with the knife toward the walls. "Cabin." "Who are you?" He went back to sharpening the knife. Shing, shing, shing. Clara's hand went to her belly. The baby. Was it? She couldn't tell. She only felt the cold ache, fear, hot and sharp, cut through the shock. The stagecoach," she said, her voice trembling. "The others—" "Dead," the man said. He didn't stop the knife. The word hung in the air. Dead. Just like that. Clara squeezed her eyes shut. The drummer, the old woman, dead. "What do you want?" she asked. This time, he did stop. He set the knife and stone down. He stood up. Clara flinched, pulling the stiff blanket up to her chin. He was even bigger standing. He walked to the fire, picked up a tin cup from the hearth, and dipped it into a kettle hanging over the flames. He walked toward her. Clara pressed herself back against the log wall. He stopped a few feet away, holding out the cup. "Water," he said. His voice was like gravel, rough, unused. She stared at the cup, then at him. She was thirsty. Her throat felt like it was full of ash, but he was a stranger, a silent, large man with a knife, in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. He waited. When she didn't move, he huffed, annoyed. He put the cup down on the floor by the cot, well within her reach, and walked back to the fire. He sat down and picked up his knife. "Shing, shing, shing!" That was all. He did not ask her name. He did not ask what happened. He just sat there, making his blade sharper. Clara watched him until her eyelids grew too heavy. She was suspicious. She was terrified, but she was also alive. She reached out a trembling hand, grabbed the cup, and drank the hot, smoky water. Then she fell back into a dark, restless sleep. For 3 days, they lived in that silence. The man, Holt, she'd heard him mutter his own name once when he dropped a log, would leave in the mornings. He'd just vanish into the gray curtain of snow. And Clara, alone, would panic. The silence of the cabin was worse when he was gone. She'd pace the small dirt floor, checking the flimsy door, staring out the dirty window at the endless, swirling white. Then he would return, as silent as he'd left. He'd appear in the doorway, a ghost covered in snow, carrying 2 or 3 rabbits or a pair of grouse. He'd skin them, clean them, and put them in the pot. He gave her broth. He gave her water. He never spoke. Clara was in shock, her mind moving slow, but her body was healing. The cut on her head was scabbing over. The deep ache in her belly had subsided, and one morning she felt it, a faint butterfly kick. The relief was so strong it made her weep. She cried silently, her face turned to the wall. If Holt heard her, he gave no sign. On the 4th day, the snow stopped. The silence in the cabin became too heavy to bear. Holt was mending a snowshoe, his big hands surprisingly careful with the wet rawhide. "They'll be looking for me," Clara said, her voice small. Holt didn't look up. "Who?" "People from the town, Elk Bluff." He kept working the rawhide. "I was running," she said. The words just fell out. "I'm running from my husband." She waited. He said nothing. "He's dead," she whispered. "My husband, he's dead. They think I did it." The man's hands stilled. He had the rawhide pulled tight. He held it there, his knuckles white. He was a respected man, Jonas Greeley. Holt stiffened. It was not a big movement. It was just a tightening in his shoulders, a sudden stop to all motion. He sat there, frozen, staring at the snowshoe in his lap. He knew the name. She could tell. Jonas Greeley, judge, preacher, and banker of Elk Bluff, the man who owned the mine, the man who owned the town. Clara's heart hammered. "You know him?" Holt took a slow breath. He did not look at her. He wrapped the rawhide strip one more time, his movements jerky, too tight. "I've heard the name," he said. His voice was flat. "Dead." He said nothing else. He tied off the knot with a violent tug and stood up. He grabbed his coat and went outside, slamming the rough planked door behind him. Clara was alone again, but this time the air was colder. She had said the name, and the name had meant something to him. The snow came again that night. It came down not as flakes, but as a solid, white wall. It erased the world. Holt came back in, his beard caked with ice, and dumped a load of firewood by the hearth. He checked the door, wedging a piece of wood under it to block the draft. "How long?" Clara started, but her voice trailed off. Holt understood. "The pass is closed." He knocked the ice from his hat. "It'll be closed till April, maybe May." The reality hit her. Trapped. Not for days, for months. trapped in this tiny, ruined cabin with this silent, brooding man. Two strangers, stuck in a 10-by-10 box while the world outside tried to kill them. They settled into a grim routine. Holt hunted. He kept the fire going. He chopped wood. Clara, her strength returning, took over the cooking. She boiled the rabbit meat until it was tender. She swept the dirt floor with a broom of pine boughs. They moved around each other, two planets in a small, dark orbit, careful never to touch, careful never to speak of anything that mattered. The secrets thickened the air. Clara's secrets came out in the night. She'd wake up screaming, her hands in front of her face, begging, "No, please, Jonas, don't! Not the baby! Please, stop!" She would be sitting bolt upright on the cot, her eyes wide with a terror that was not for the man in the room, but for the one in her head. The first time it happened, Holt shot up from his own bedroll by the fire. He was on his feet, his hands clenched, ready for a fight. He saw her, shaking in the moonlight, her face slick with tears and sweat. He saw the memory she was fighting. He did not go to her. He did not comfort her. He just stood there, watching, his own breathing harsh in the cold. Then, he slowly sat back down, turned his back to her, and stared into the dying embers of the fire. He never asked her about it in the morning. He never mentioned it at all. Clara, in turn, noticed things about him. She noticed the way he moved. Silent. He could cross the room without the floorboards creaking. He was a hunter, through and through. And she noticed the most obvious and most terrifying thing. He wore no gun. In Wyoming territory, a man without a pistol on his hip was either a preacher or a fool. This man was no preacher, and he was certainly no fool. He had the hunting rifle, a long-barreled Springfield, which he kept meticulously clean, but he wore no sidearm, no holster, no belt. It was a choice, a deliberate absence, and it scared her more than if he'd been bristling with weapons. It meant he was either running from the law or running from himself, or both. One night, the loneliness and the isolation finally broke her. Holt was asleep, or pretending to be. The wind was howling outside, a high, mournful sound like a woman weeping. The cabin felt small, like a coffin. She couldn't breathe. She thought of Jonas. She thought of the men at the stagecoach. She thought of the months of snow ahead. She thought of the baby inside her, a prisoner just like her. She had to get out. Quietly, she rose from the cot. She didn't grab her coat. She didn't grab her boots. She just moved, desperate and irrational, toward the door. She needed air. She needed to run. Even if the snow took her, it was better than this. Her hand was on the wooden latch when his voice cut through the dark. "Don't!" She spun around. He was sitting up in his bedroll, a dark shape against the faint orange glow of the embers. I need air," she stammered. "There's air in here." "Please, I can't stay in here." She turned back to the door. "You'll be dead in 20 minutes, he said, his voice flat. "Your feet will freeze first. You won't even feel it." "I don't care." She fumbled with the latch. He moved. He was up and across the room in 2 strides. He didn't grab her. He didn't touch her. He just stood in front of the door, a wall of shadow. "Go back to bed, ma'am." "No!" she cried, her voice cracking. "Let me go! I can't! I won't!" She pushed at his chest. It was like pushing at a stone wall. He didn't move. He just looked down at her, his face unreadable in the dark. Clara broke. She slid down, her back against the door, and buried her face in her hands. She wept, not loud, but with the deep, racking sobs of someone who had held it in for too long. Holt stood over her, awkward, his hands clenched at his sides. He looked at her bare feet on the cold, packed earth floor. He did not yell. He did not tell her to be quiet. He simply bent down, picked up her worn leather boots from where she'd left them, and placed them gently on the floor beside her. He walked back to his bedroll and lay down. After a long time, Clara's sobs quieted. She looked at the boots. It was not a kindness. It was a fact. It was a statement. Stay. You will die. She pulled her feet under her, got up, and went back to the cot. The mountains became the third person in the cabin. The Wind River Range, beautiful and terrible. In the mornings, the sun would hit the high peaks and set them on fire, painting them pink and orange. But it was a cold fire. It was a beauty that did not care if you lived or died. And at night, the wolves. They would howl, their calls echoing down the canyons. It was not a lonely sound. It was the sound of a family, a hungry family, working together, running down the week. Clara would lie awake, listening to them, and feel a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Holt would listen, too. He'd just stare at the roof, his expression blank. One afternoon, Holt came in from checking his traps, his jacket covered in snow. He was blowing on his hands to warm them. The cabin was warm. The stew was hot. He pulled off the heavy jacket, and then, because his undershirt was damp with sweat and snow, he turned his back to her and pulled it off, too. Clara looked up from the fire and stopped breathing. His back was a map of old violence. A puckered, silvery scar sat high on his left shoulder. An old bullet wound. Lower, near his ribs, was a long, white line, straight and clean, from a knife. But it was the brand on his right shoulder blade that made her put a hand to her mouth. It was a shape she didn't recognize. Not a ranch brand, something else. Something meant to mark a man as property. He stood there, his muscles tense, and she knew he could feel her watching. He knew what she was seeing. He did not explain them. He just reached for his dry shirt, pulled it over his head, and the map was gone. That night, they ate in silence. It was a heavy, thick silence, full of the things she had seen and the things he had not said. The only sound was the scrape of their spoons in the tin bowls, and the crackle of the pine logs in the hearth. Holt set his bowl down. He looked at her. His eyes were tired. "You're safe now," he said. He meant it. He meant from the cold. He meant from the wolves. He meant, perhaps, from him. Clara stared into her bowl. The stew was tasteless. She thought of the last time a man had said those words to her. It had been Jonas, on their wedding night. He had bolted the door to their fine house, turned to her, and smiled. She looked up at Holt, her eyes clear and cold as the ice on the river. "That's what he said, too." Holt's expression did not change, but something in his eyes flickered. He had offered her the only thing he had, the safety of his walls, the meat from his traps. And she had just told him it was not enough. The fire cracked, spitting a hot ember onto the stones. Holt turned away from her and looked into the flames. The winter had truly begun. After Holt's words, Clara had said nothing. That night, and the next day, the silence in the cabin was different. It was no longer the empty, suspicious silence of two strangers. It was the heavy, aching silence of a wound that has been touched. Holt's attempt at comfort, clumsy as it was, had been real, and her reply, sharp and true, had cost them both. He went back to his routine, splitting wood, checking the traps, but he was more closed off than ever. He kept his back to her. Clara felt ashamed, not for what she said, but for the truth of it. She was safe from the snow, yes, but she was not safe from her memories. And this man, with his own ghosts, was not safe from his... She knew she could not just be a burden. She was not the fragile woman Jonas Greeley had tried to make her. She was a survivor. She began to work. Her body was still healing, and the growing child made her clumsy, but she forced herself. When Holt was gone, she swept the packed earth floor. She found his mending kit, a small pouch with a rusted needle, a spool of thick black thread, and a lump of beeswax. She took his blanket from his bedroll. It was stiff with dirt and smelled of pine smoke and the faint, musky scent of him. She sat for hours, her fingers unused to the work, pulling the thick thread through the wool, mending the rents and holes. When he returned that evening, dark against the blinding snow, he saw her by the fire, his blanket across her lap. He stopped, his hand on the doorframe. He watched her pull the thread tight and bite it off with her teeth. She looked up, afraid he would be angry. It was torn. Holt just looked at her, then at the blanket. He gave a single, short nod. He said nothing, but he did not turn his back to her that night. He sat across the fire, cleaning his rifle, and they shared the silence. The snow kept falling. It was a weight. It pressed down on the roof, on the trees, on their spirits. One morning, a low groan came from the rafters above them. The weight was too much. Holt got the one shovel he'd found in the shed, a broken thing with a cracked handle. "Stay inside," he said. He climbed up, using the jutting logs of the cabin wall as a crude ladder. Clara watched him through the window, a dark figure against a white sky, heaving shovelfuls of snow over the edge. He was strong, but the work was heavy. She went to the door. "Let me help." He didn't look down. "Go back inside. You'll catch your death." "I am not an invalid," she said. Her voice was sharp. It was the first fire he had heard from her. "I can't climb, but I can clear what you throw down." He stopped, shovel in midair. He looked down at her, a small, stubborn woman with a belly, standing in the drift by the door. He almost argued, but he saw the look in her eyes. It was the same look he had, the need to do something. "Fine," he grunted. "Don't slip." For an hour, they worked. He shoveled, she cleared. They were a team. That night, the work had warmed them. The shared labor had broken something. They ate the rabbit stew, and Clara found herself speaking. "He owned the town," she said, her voice quiet. Holt looked up from his bowl. "Who?" "Jonas, my husband, Mr. Greeley." She picked at a splinter on the rough-hewn table. "He wasn't just in the town. He was the town. He was the judge. He was the banker. He owned the mine. He even built the church. He preached the sermon on Sundays." Holt stopped eating. He set his spoon down. He knew the name, had heard it in saloons. A man of power, a man who held the paper on half the territory. "A man like that has enemies," Holt said, his voice neutral. Clara let out a short, bitter laugh. "Not in Elk Bluff. He had admirers. He had followers. He had a face for the town. A good face, kind, pious." She stared into the fire, her eyes seeing something far away. "But at home, the doors were locked, and the face changed." Holt watched her. He did not move. He did not breathe. "He'd read scripture," she whispered. "He'd read from Proverbs, about a wicked woman, and then he'd use his hands. He'd say he had to cast out the devil he said was inside me. He'd try to cleanse me." She was shaking. She wrapped her arms around herself. "They said I poisoned his coffee. His own sister, Mildred. She told the sheriff I'd been buying poison. For rats, I said. We had rats in the cellar, but she twisted it. She said I was angry, that I was—" "Why'd she lie?" Holt's voice was low. "Because he was sick," Clara said, her voice hollow. "He was sick for weeks, and one morning he just didn't wake up, and I was with child, his child. He was almost happy. He wanted an heir for the first time. He stopped his cleansing, and then he died. And Mildred, she knew the will. He left it all to me, to the baby. He left her nothing." She looked at Holt, her eyes wide with the unfairness of it. "She said I did it, and they all believed her. The whole town, the man he preached to, the men who owed him money, they turned on me. They called me a killer. I had to run." Holt sat there. He looked at her, this woman who had been beaten by the town's saint, now hunted for a crime she likely didn't commit. He thought of the boy he'd killed. the one who had surrendered. He picked up his spoon and went back to eating. Clara stared at him, stunned. He had nothing to say, no words of comfort, no judgment. He just ate, but when he was done, he took her bowl, too. He washed them both in the bucket of melted snow. He did not ask any more questions. That night, the cabin was still. Clara lay on her cot, her hands resting on her stomach. She hadn't felt the baby kick. Not in a whole day. The fall on the stagecoach, the run through the snow, the terror. What if the child was gone? What if she was carrying a... The fear was cold. Colder than the cabin. Colder than the wind. She must have made a sound, a small, choked sob. "What?" Holt's voice came from the darkness by the fire. "It's nothing." "It ain't nothing. You're crying." She took a ragged breath. "When I fell in the coach, and when I ran, it was a bad fall. She couldn't say it. "I don't know if the baby, I haven't felt it move. Not since yesterday. I think it might be gone." The silence that followed was absolute. She heard the wind outside. She heard the fire hiss. She thought he had fallen asleep, or was ignoring her. Then she heard him move. He got up, not quickly, but with a slow, deliberate weight. He went to the corner of the cabin, where he kept the firewood and a pile of broken things left by the long-dead trapper. He rummaged. He found some broken pieces of a chair and some narrow planks from a smashed crate. He brought them near the fire. He took out his skinning knife. He took out the rawhide strips he used for his snowshoes. By the low, flickering light of the fire, he began to work. He did not speak. He just worked. He sawed the wood into small, equal lengths with a rusted trap saw. He notched them with his knife. He lashed them together with the rawhide, his big hands pulling the knots impossibly tight. Clara sat up on her cot, the blanket pulled around her. She watched him. He was building a box, a small, crude frame. He was building a cot, a crib. He didn't say, "The baby will be fine." He didn't offer her empty platitudes. He didn't tell her not to worry. He just built a bed for the baby. It was, she realized, the most profound statement of hope she had ever seen. He was a man who did not speak of things. He did them. He was building a bed for a child that might be dead, because it was the only thing he knew how to do. He worked for 2 hours. When he was finished, he placed the small, sturdy frame on the floor near her cot, in the warmest part of the cabin. He went back to his bedroll and lay down. Just as Clara was about to lie down, just as the tears of gratitude started to well in her eyes, she felt it. A faint, fluttering kick, a tiny, insistent pulse of life. She gasped, her hand flying to her belly. It was there. It was alive. "Holt," she whispered. "Go to sleep," he said, his voice rough. The next few weeks, the cabin was different. The tiny, empty cot sat by the fire. A promise. The tension between them changed. It was no longer the sharp edge of suspicion. It was a new awareness. They were a man and a woman, trapped together, waiting for a child. They talked more, not about their pasts, but about things. He told her how to tell the difference between a wolf track and a dog track. She told him about her father's farm in Ohio, how the corn grew so high. One night, they sat by the fire, the air warm and close. Clara was mending a tear in her own dress. "You're good with your hands," she said, nodding toward the crib. "And the traps. You live like this all the time?" "When I have to," he said. He was oiling the action on his rifle. "What did you do before?" she asked, her voice soft. "Before you started drifting?" He stopped. The rag in his hand went still. He stared at the metal of the gun, gleaming in the firelight. He owed her nothing. It was safer to lie. Trapper, miner, farmer. But she had told him about Greeley. She had laid her truth on the table. "I was a hunter," he said, his voice low. "Like for deer, for game." He shook his head. his eyes still on the rifle. "For men." Clara's hand stopped mending. "I brought him in," he said, his voice flat. "Dead." Dead or alive? The poster didn't much matter which, as long as the name was right. They called it bounty hunting. He said the words like they were a sickness. He braced himself for her reaction. The gasp, the fear, the disgust. Clara was quiet for a long time. She looked at his scarred hands. The hands that had mended the cabin. The hands that had built a crib. "A hard life," she said simply. Holt looked up at her, shocked. No judgment, no fear, just an observation. "A hard life." He looked back at the gun. "Yeah." He went silent then. He retreated back into himself, as if the confession had cost him too much. That night, the nightmares came back. But this time, it was not Clara who screamed. It was Holt. He shot up from his bedroll, his eyes wide and blind, his hands grasping at the air. "Hands up!" he roared, his voice thick with sleep and terror. "I said hands! Don't!" It was a raw, agonizing sound. Clara was on her feet before she was even awake. She rushed to him, her only instinct to help. "Holt, you're dreaming! You're all right!" She put her hand on his shoulder. He reacted like a cornered animal. He flinched violently, his arm swinging up in a backhand motion meant to clear her away. He caught her on the cheek. It wasn't hard, not like Jonas. It was a blind, panicked reflex, but it sent her stumbling back. He froze. His eyes focused. He saw her. He saw her hand, held up to her face. He saw the fear in her eyes, but it was fear of him. The madness in his eyes shattered, replaced by a deep, hollow shame. He scrambled away from her, pushing himself back against the log wall, as if to get as far from her as possible. "Get back," he breathed, his voice ragged. Don't you ever touch me when I'm sleeping. You hear me? Ever." I was just... "Don't." She stood there, her heart hammering. He was shaking, not with rage, with fear. He was terrified of what he had almost done. She did not retreat. She went to the kettle, poured some water into the tin cup, and brought it to him. She did not hand it to him. She set it on the floor, just as he had done for her. She went back to her cot. He watched her, his breathing ragged. He did not touch the water. The next day, he was gone before she woke. He did not come back until long after dark. He was carrying a small deer, a doe, across his shoulders, a blessing of meat that would last them weeks. But he was silent. The wall was back up, higher than ever. Clara knew she had to clean. The nightmare, the invisible blood and fear, felt like it was clinging to the walls. She swept. She scrubbed the table. She felt restless. She was sweeping by the hearth, near Holt's bedroll, when she felt it, a loose floorboard. She had seen him in the mornings. Step over that board. He never stepped on it, always over. Her curiosity and a sudden, cold premonition made her stop. She got on her knees. Her belly made it awkward. She worked her fingers under the edge of the plank. It was not nailed down. It lifted easily. Underneath, in the dark, cold earth, was a hollow, and in the hollow was an oilcloth bundle. Her hands trembled. She knew she shouldn't. This was his secret. She lifted it out. It was heavy, heavier than she expected. She put it on the table and, with trembling fingers, she unrolled the stiff, greasy cloth. A Colt Peacemaker. It was dark blue steel, with a walnut grip. It was meticulously clean. It smelled of gun oil and cold earth. The man who wore no gun. The man who had sold his horse and walked away from himself. He had a pistol. He had it all this time. Hidden. The lie of it hit her. No, not a lie. A concealment. He was not the defenseless man he pretended to be. He was a man with a secret, buried under the floor, just like her. She looked at it for a long time. The thing that had made him, the thing he was running from. She wrapped it back up, carefully, just as she had found it. She put it back in the hollow. She replaced the floorboard. She swept the dirt back over the seam. When he came in, she said nothing, but she knew. A few days later, the sun came out. It was a bright, blinding, cold sun. The snow had a hard, icy crust on top. Holt was restless. He looked at Clara, then at the door. He walked to the hearth, stared at the loose floorboard, then looked back at her. He seemed to make a decision. He knelt, lifted the board, and took out the oilcloth bundle. Clara did not pretend to be surprised. She just watched. He unwrapped the gun. He checked the action. He slid 6 heavy brass cartridges into the cylinder. He stood up and tucked the gun into the waistband of his trousers. He grabbed his coat. "Come on," he said. "Where?" "Outside, you gotta learn." "Learn what?" "To shoot." He took her out, 20 yards from the cabin, into the blinding white. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe. He set a tin can on a fence post, what was left of an old corral. I can't be here all the time," he said. "The snow's gonna break. Things move in the spring. You're alone. A man comes. You gotta know how." He tried to put the pistol in her hand. She flinched. I can't," she whispered. "Jonas, he never let me touch them. He said they were unholy for a woman." "I ain't Jonas." Holt's voice was hard, but not mean. He pushed the gun into her hand. The weight of it shocked her. It was so heavy. "Hold it with 2 hands," he instructed. "Arm straight. Don't look at the gun. Look at the can. Sight down the barrel. Squeeze the trigger. Don't pull it. Squeeze. Slow." Clara lifted it. It wobbled. She was terrified of the noise. She closed her eyes tight. She yanked the trigger. The explosion was deafening. The recoil slammed her arm back, and she shrieked, dropping the heavy pistol into the snow. The tin can sat on the post, untouched. Holt sighed. "You closed your eyes? You dropped it? You're dead." He picked up the gun, expertly brushed the snow from the action, and handed it back. "Again, and keep your eyes open. The noise won't kill you." She tried. She missed. The shot went high. She tried again. The shot went low, kicking up a spray of snow. She was trembling. I can't. Again. She loaded it herself this time, her fingers clumsy on the cartridges. She aimed. She tried to squeeze. The shot went wide, clipping a branch on a pine tree above Holt's head. A heavy load of snow, which had been resting on the branch, dumped directly onto him. He stood there, sputtering, covered from his hat to his shoulders in white powder. He looked utterly ridiculous. Clara looked at him, his grim expression, half hidden by snow, and a sound bubbled up in her chest, a sound she had not made in over a year. It was a giggle. It shocked her. She clapped a hand over her mouth. Holt brushed the snow from his face. He looked at her. His eyes narrowed. He tried to stay grim. He really did. But then, the corner of his mouth twitched. A low rumble started in his chest. It sounded rough, like a rusty hinge. It was a laugh. They stood there, 2 broken people in a world of white, laughing. It was brief. It was honest. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then it was gone. The silence that came after was warm. As they walked back to the cabin, a shadow passed over the snow. They both looked up. A huge, red-tailed hawk was circling high above them, riding the wind, its head tilted, watching the ground. "He's huntin'," Holt said. Clara watched it, her head back. "They're patient. They just wait." She paused. "When my mother died, I was 12. It was spring, back in Ohio. In the sky, it was just full of hawks, all day. They just circled the house. They wouldn't leave." She looked at Holt. "My father said they were waiting to carry her spirit away. Jonas, when I told him that, he said it was heathen talk." Holt watched the hawk until it drifted over the ridge. "Your father sounds like a good man," he said. That night, everything was different. The laugh had changed the air. The hawk had changed it. They sat by the fire. Holt was cleaning the pistol. The one she now knew was his. Clara was mending her dress. The single oil lamp cast a small, warm glow. The cabin felt small, but not like a trap, like a shelter. They sat close, not touching, but closer than usual. Clara set her mending aside. She watched his hands, the hands that had been gentle with the gun, the hands that had taught her, the hands that were scarred. She reached out. She did not think about it. She just did it. She rested her hand on his, the one holding the oil rag. Holt froze. He stopped breathing. He stared at her hand. It was pale, clean, resting on his dark, scarred knuckles. He could feel her warmth. It had been so long, so many years since he had felt a touch that was not violence. He did not pull away. Slowly, his other hand, the one holding the gun, set the pistol down. He turned the hand she was touching over, palm up, so his fingers brushed against hers. It was just a touch, a question. The cabin was silent. There was only the fire. And then he saw it. The face of the boy, the one in Texas, hands up, surrendered. He saw the brand on his own shoulder. He saw the men he had hunted. He saw the blood on his hands. Blood he could never wash off. He yanked his hand away. He stood up so fast he knocked over the crate he was sitting on. "Don't!" he choked out. "Holt," she said, standing up, too. "You don't want a man like me," he said, his voice harsh, broken. He was backing away from her. "You don't know what I am. You don't want me." She stood there, her belly between them. She was not afraid of him, not his anger. She had seen his nightmare. She had seen his laugh. "That's not your choice to make," she said, her voice strong. He stared at her. She was right, and that, more than anything, terrified him. He grabbed his coat. He grabbed his bedroll. "Holt, where are you going?" she cried. It's freezing out there." He opened the door. The wind howled, snatching the warmth from the cabin, replacing it with a blast of ice. "I've slept colder," he said. He stepped out. He did not slam the door. He just pulled it shut, leaving her alone in the sudden, terrible silence. Clara stood by the closed door for a long time. He had rejected her. A hot, stinging shame washed over her. What had she been thinking? Touching him, a man like that, a killer, a man who could not even stand his own touch. She went to her cot and lay down. She pulled the blanket up, the one she had mended. The tears came, but they were not the tears she had cried for Jonas. It was shame. Yes, shame for wanting, shame for being alive. But it was desire, too. A deep, aching loneliness that she had buried for years. A desire for a touch that wasn't cruel, for a hand that wasn't raised. And it was something deeper, something that scared her more than the shame. She was crying for him, for the man who had to sleep in the snow because he was more afraid of himself than he was of the cold. She was crying because he was as broken as she was. And she was crying because, for the first time in her life, she had reached for someone and he had been the one to run. Holt came back into the cabin just as the sun was turning the snow a cold, watery gray. He had slept by the woodpile, turning every hour, the cold seeping into his bones. He came in stiff, his beard caked with frost, and he did not look at her. Clara was awake. She had not slept at all. The shame from the night before sat in her throat, thick as ash. He had rejected her. He had seen her want, and he had run from it, run into the freezing cold rather than be near her. He built up the fire, his movements angry, jerky. He slammed the logs down. He did not speak. She did not speak. The silence in the cabin was worse than the cold. It was the sound of two people who had seen too much of each other. He grabbed his axe. "I'm checking the traps," he bit off, and left. Clara watched him go. She felt hollowed out. He was gone for an hour, splitting wood at the edge of the clearing, the sharp thwack of his axe the only sound, a punctuation to the heavy silence. He was working out his anger, his fear. Suddenly, the sound of the axe stopped. It did not just stop, it stopped mid-swing. Clara went to the small, dirty window. Holt was standing by the woodpile, frozen, axe in hand. He was staring, not at the trees, not at the ground. He was staring past the ridge, down toward the pass, miles away. Clara opened the door, the cold air hitting her face. "Holt, what is it?" He did not turn. His voice was flat, and all the anger was gone. It was replaced by something else, something cold and sharp. "Go inside. Clara, now!" "What do you see?" she insisted, stepping out into the snow, her hand shielding her eyes against the glare. And then she saw it. A black dot, far, far away. A single speck of black, moving against the endless white. It was a man, on a horse, coming up the trail. "Holt?" she whispered. "I said, inside." He was not the drifter anymore. He was not the broken man from last night. He was someone else. He dropped the axe and moved toward the cabin, his steps long and purposeful. He burst through the door, his eyes sweeping the small room. He was focused. He was a hunter again. "The floor," he said. "What?" "The floor, where I keep the get-over here." He grabbed the edge of the rough-hewn table and shoved it, the tin bowls rattling. He knelt, threw the ragged bearskin rug aside, and jammed his fingers under the loose floorboard. He ripped it up. The dark earthen hole gaped at them. "Get in," he said. Clara looked at the hole. It was a grave. It was damp and dark and smelled of cold earth and spiders. "No, Holt, I can't. It's too small. The baby—" "He's from Elk Bluff," Holt said, his voice low and fast. "I'd bet my life on it. He ain't here for me. He's here for you. Get in, now." He was not asking. He reached into the hole first and pulled out the oilcloth bundle. He unwrapped the Colt, shoved the heavy pistol into the waistband of his trousers, and covered it with his shirt. He turned back to her. "Clara, now, please." The please broke her. She nodded, her face pale. She sat on the edge of the hole. He helped her lower herself in, her belly making it a clumsy, painful process. She settled into the dirt, pulling her knees to her chest. It was terrifying. "You be quiet," he said, his face framed in the opening above her. "You hear me? I don't care what you hear. I don't care if he sets the cabin on fire. You do not make a sound. You do not move. You understand?" She nodded, her eyes wide. "Good." He put the floorboard back, leaving just a tiny crack for air. The world went dark. She heard him drag the rug back over the spot. She heard him drag the table. Then, she heard him sit on the crate by the fire. She heard the scrape of a spoon in a bowl. He was waiting. It felt like an eternity. She was breathing in the smell of damp soil. She was alone in the dark. Then she heard it, the crunch of boots in the snow. Right outside the door, the jingle of a bridle. A horse, blowing hard. A sharp, official knock. She heard Holt clear his throat. "It's open." The door creaked, the sound of a new man, a new voice. "Afternoon. You been holed up here long, friend?" The voice was steady, a voice used to asking questions. "Long enough," Holt said. His voice was a low growl. "Name's Miller, deputy out of Elk Bluff. Just checking the high country. Seeing who made it, who didn't. You seen anyone pass this way? Last few days?" "Just you," Holt said. Clara held her breath. Her heart was hammering so loud she was sure the man above could hear it. "Just me, huh?" Deputy Miller said. There was a pause, the sound of him walking, his boots heavy on the floor. "That's strange." "Why's that?" Holt's voice was sharp. "We found the wreckage of that stagecoach, down by the Sweetwater, Picked clean. Looked like a woman's tracks headed this way, but they vanished. Figured the snow took 'em. Or a wolf. Wolves been thick, Holt said. Yeah. Miller paused again. I'm looking for someone in particular. A woman. Name of Clara Greeley. Clara put her hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. She murdered her husband, Miller's voice went on. Poisoned him. Judge Greeley. A fine man. Pillar of the community. Don't know him, Holt said. Don't know her. You would. $500 reward. Clara heard the sound of paper unfolding. That's her crude drawing, but it gets the likeness. There was a long, terrible silence. Ain't seen her, Holt said, and I ain't seen no $500. All I seen is snow. Right. Miller didn't sound convinced. Clara heard him walk again, moving around the small space. You all alone up here? What's it look like? Holt snapped. It looks strange, that's all. A man alone. His voice was coming from near the table. You expecting company? Clara's blood ran cold. No, Holt said. That's 2 bowls on the table. A horrible, dead silence. Clara squeezed her eyes shut. He'd forgotten. In his hurry, he'd left her bowl. Holt's voice, when it came, was different. It was gruff, but also sad. Had a dog. A dog? Miller asked. Yeah, a good one. Got into it with a porcupine. Quills got infected. He died? Last week. Been hard. Ain't had the heart to put his bowl away yet. Stupid, I guess. Clara almost wept. It was a good lie, a smart lie. But Miller wasn't buying it. She heard him walk over toward her cot. That's a small bed. Over there, by the fire. Your dog sleep in that? Clara could picture the crib Holt had built. Made it, Holt said, his voice hard now. Winter's long. Nothing to do. A man gets strange. Starts whittling. Making things. Hell, I don't know why I made it. Something to do. Something to do, Miller repeated. His voice flat. He did not believe him. Clara knew it. He did not believe a word. Right. Well, like I said, you see this woman. You be careful. She's pregnant. Due soon. And she's clever. They say she's manipulative. I'll keep an eye out, Holt said. You do that. Miller walked to the door. He stopped. Strange place to winter. Alone. With no dog. You take care, friend. The door opened. A blast of cold air hit the floorboards above Clara's head. The door closed. She heard Holt move to the window. She heard him stand there. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10. He was watching him, making sure he was gone. Finally! She heard the table scrape. The rug was pulled back. The floorboard lifted. Light flooded in. Holt's face was pale, his jaw tight. He reached a hand down. He's gone. She took his hand. He pulled her up. She scrambled out, covered in dirt, shaking so hard she could barely stand. The cold of the earth had seeped into her bones. He's gone, Holt said again, softer this time. But he didn't believe me. He'll be back. Or he'll send others. Clara collapsed onto her cot, pulling the blanket around her. She was weeping, deep, racking sobs of terror and relief. You lied for me, she whispered, looking up at him. He said $500. Holt, that's a fortune. You could buy a ranch. You could go anywhere. It's blood money, Holt said, turning away from her, shoving the pistol back into its hiding place. You should have told him, she cried, her voice rising. You should have turned me in. What am I doing to you? I'm going to ruin you. I'm going to get you killed. Shut up, he said, his back to her. No, I won't shut up. She got to her feet, her legs still trembling. I will not be the reason they hang you. I'm poison. Jonas was right. He always said I ruined everything I touched. He was right. Let me go. I'll walk out there. I'll find him. I'll give myself up." She stumbled toward the door. I said, "Shut up!" Holt spun around and grabbed her shoulders. His grip was hard, painful. His face was inches from hers, his eyes wild. "You ain't ruining me. You can't. I'm already ruined. You think I give a damn about that Tin Star deputy? You think I care about his law?" He let her go, shoving her back. He turned away again, running his hands through his hair, his whole body shaking. "Holt, why?" she whispered, terrified by his violence, but more by the raw pain underneath it. "Why do this for me?" He was quiet for a long time, his back to her. The only sound in the cabin was the wind, which was starting to pick up. "Texas," he said. His voice was a low, rasping sound, like sandpaper on rock. I was hunting a man, fella who'd killed a rancher and his wife. I tracked him for a month. Found him holed up in a canyon with his younger brother. The kitty was just a boy. 17, maybe." Clara stood by the cot, frozen, listening. "We shot it out," Holt said, his voice dead. "I hit the older one. He went down. And the kid, he just threw his gun down. Threw it clean across the room. He had his hands up. He was crying. He was begging me. He hadn't done nothing. He was just there. Scared." Holt's hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists at his sides. "The posse was right behind me. I'd been riding with them. They wanted blood. They thought I was soft, that I'd let him go. And I was trying to save my own skin. I was trying to prove I was as hard as them. I looked at that boy. His hands were in the air. He had surrendered, and I shot him. I shot him right in the chest." The cabin was dead silent. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. "I ain't worth saving. Clara," Holt muttered. He slumped down on the crate, his head in his hands. "I ain't got no honor. I ain't got no soul left to sell, so don't you talk to me about ruin. I was ruined long before I ever met you." Clara looked at him, this broken, violent, gentle man. This man who had killed a child who surrendered. This man who had just lied to a deputy to save a woman he barely knew, a woman accused of murder. She did not feel fear. She did not feel judgment. She only felt a deep, aching sorrow that matched her own. She went to him. She knelt on the floor in front of him. He wouldn't look at her. He just stared at the dirt, ashamed. She reached out and took his hand, his big, scarred, trembling hand. He flinched. He tried to pull it away, but she held on. "Then maybe we're even," she whispered. He stopped pulling. He slowly looked up at her. His eyes were full of ghosts. He had expected her to be horrified, to be disgusted. But the look in her eyes, it was not judgment. It was understanding. It was a shared, terrible darkness. He gripped her hand, his fingers crushing hers, clinging to her like a drowning man. Just then, the wind, which had been quiet, hit the cabin with a sudden, violent shriek. The whole structure groaned. Holt looked up, his head snapping toward the window. He let go of her hand and stood. The sky, which had been a clear, cold gray, had turned a sickly, yellowish white. The air was heavy, still. "What is it?" Clara asked, standing up, her hand on her belly. "Blizzard," Holt said, his voice grim. "A bad one. I know this quiet. It's coming fast." It hit them an hour later. It did not snow. It was as if the sky itself was falling. A solid wall of white moving sideways, driven by a wind that did not howl, but screamed. The cabin, which had felt like a shelter, now felt like a tiny, fragile box about to be crushed. The temperature plummeted so fast they could feel it, like a physical blow. They spent the night stuffing rags into the cracks in the walls. The wind forced its way in, bringing fine, dry snow that coated the floor. They huddled by the fire, feeding it log after log. The storm raged all night, and all the next day. They were trapped in a white, roaring hell, unable to see an inch past the window. On the second night of the blizzard, Clara gasped. She was sitting on the cot, trying to stay warm. "Holt!" He was by the fire, his face grim. "What?" It's a pain." Her face had gone pale. "A sharp, oh God." She bent over, her arms wrapped around her belly. Holt's blood ran cold. He scrambled to his feet. The baby. "It's too soon," she panted, her eyes wide with terror. It's not time. It's a month. At least a month away. Another wave hit her. She cried out, a sharp, piercing sound that was almost lost in the scream of the wind. "It's the storm," Holt muttered, his own panic rising. "Or the fall. Or the deputy. Damn it!" He was a bounty hunter. He knew how to track. He knew how to shoot. He knew how to gut a deer. He did not know anything about this. What do I do?" he asked, his voice frantic. "Clara, tell me what to do." "Water," she gasped, leaning back against the wall. "Hot water, and cloths, clean cloths, if you have any, and blankets, all the blankets." He moved. He was clumsy. He grabbed the heavy kettle, dumped their last bucket of melted snow into it, and swung it over the fire. "Blankets." He grabbed the one from his own bedroll. "Is this clean?" "It's fine. Just get it." "Cloths, linen," he muttered. He looked around, desperate. He found an old, clean flour sack he'd been saving. He took his hunting knife, the one he sharpened every night, and started ripping it into long, thin strips. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the knife. It went on for hours. It was a nightmare. The storm outside and the storm inside, both raging, both trying to tear the world apart. Clara's pain grew worse. She was not the quiet, frightened woman he had found. She was an animal, caught in a trap. She screamed. She cursed. She cursed Jonas. She cursed the deputy. She cursed God. Holt he did what he could. He mopped her forehead with a wet rag. He gave her sips of water. He held her hand, his own knuckles white. He felt useless. He was terrified. Every time she screamed, it sounded like the kid. Every time she cried out in agony, he saw the boy's face in Texas, his hands in the air. It's coming!" she shrieked, her voice ripping. "Holt, it's coming now. I can feel it." She was on the cot, her back arched, her hands gripping the frame. I can't hold it in anymore," she gasped. She was not talking to him. She was screaming from the floor of her soul. Holt moved to the end of the cot. He looked, and his world stopped. He saw blood. He saw the crown of the baby's head, dark with hair. He froze. Everything, the blood, the screaming, the storm, the memory of the kid in Texas, the deputy, the fear, it all hit him at once. He was paralyzed. He was back there, in the dust, his gun smoking. He couldn't breathe. His hands were trembling, useless. He was staring, but he wasn't seeing. "Holt!" Clara screamed. It was a sound of pure terror. "Holt, do something! Please, help me! It's please!" He couldn't move. He was lost. He was not a healer. He was a killer. His hands only knew how to take life, not bring it. He was going to fail. He was going to kill her. He was going to kill this baby. He was worthless. He was a fraud. "Holt!" Her voice, it cut through the fog. It was not the kid. It was not the deputy. It was Clara, and she needed him. Something snapped. He was not in Texas. He was here. He moved. His hands stopped shaking. The baby was coming. It was happening. "Push!" he yelled, his voice a raw command. "Clara, push, now!" She bore down with a guttural scream, and the child was out. It slid into the world, slick and blue and terrifyingly silent. It lay on the cot, not breathing. It was still connected to her, a thick, white cord. He had to cut it. He looked at his hands. He looked at the baby. He grabbed his small hunting knife from the table, the one he ripped sacks with, the one he skinned rabbits with. Clara saw it, through her haze of pain. She saw the man who had confessed to killing a boy, standing over her, holding a blade. Her eyes went wide with a new, final terror. What are you doing? Holt, no! He hesitated. The knife, the blood, her terror. It was a horrifying, terrible picture. His face was a mask of trauma. Then he acted. He was not a killer. Not now. He pinched the cord, hard, in 2 places. His fingers sure he did not have thread. He did not have time. He laid the blade of the knife in the embers of the fire for a single, hissing second. And then, with a steady hand, he cut the umbilical cord. The baby, suddenly, shockingly free, let out a tiny, choked gasp. Its whole body shuddered. And then it screamed. A high, thin, furious wail. A sound that was not the wind, a sound that was pure, unfiltered life. It was the most beautiful sound Holt had ever heard. It's alive? Clara sobbed, falling back onto the cot, her strength gone. Is it alive? Holt, his hands still shaking, but for a different reason now, scooped up the tiny, wailing infant. He wiped its face. It's a girl, he stammered. Clara, it's a little girl. He wrapped her in the driest, cleanest piece of the flour sack and laid her on Clara's chest. They both sobbed, him and her. They just cried, their broken, relieved sounds lost in the wail of the new baby and the dying scream of the storm. For an hour, the world was just that small, warm circle of light. The storm had finally broken. The baby was quiet, nestled against Clara. The world was at peace. Holt looked at the fire. It was dying. The woodpile, the box inside the door, it was almost empty. He'd been so focused. The deputy, the storm, the birth. I gotta get more wood, he said, his voice thick with exhaustion and relief. Clara looked at him, her eyes heavy, terrified. No, not now, not in this. Stay. It's dying down, he said. He stood up. He felt light. He felt new. We'll freeze. The baby will freeze. He pulled on his heavy coat. He grabbed the axe. I'll be right back. I promise. Just keep her warm. He leaned down. He did not even think about it. He just did it. He kissed Clara's forehead, his lips brushing her damp skin. Then he kissed the top of the baby's tiny, dark-haired head. He opened the door. The storm was over. The world was silent, buried. The snow was deep, up to his waist, a vast, white, unmarked ocean. The woodpile was only 20 yards away, a small mound in the moonlight. He waded through the heavy drift. It was hard work. He got to the woodpile, half buried, and started pulling logs free, his breath pluming in the frigid air. He stopped. He heard something. It was not the wind. It was not a wolf. It was the jingle of a harness. He looked up. Through the settling, swirling snow, in the dark line of trees at the edge of the clearing, not 100 yards away. 3 men, on horseback. They were not moving. They were just sitting there. Dark shapes against the snow, watching the cabin. Watching the thin ribbon of smoke rising from the chimney. Riders. And one of them, the one in the middle, even in the shadow, Holt recognized him. A big man, with a long coat and a wide hat, a silhouette he knew from 100 campfires and 1,000 saloons. Morgan Dake, a man who hunted bounty hunters, and he was staring right at him. For a second, Holt did not move. He just stared. The logs in his arms, the logs that meant life and warmth, suddenly felt impossibly heavy. He was not a man. He was a target, a man standing in a patch of moonlight, in a sea of white snow, holding firewood, helpless. Morgan Dake. The name was like acid in his gut. Of all the men, of all the hunters, it had to be Dake. A man who enjoyed the work. A man who never brought them in alive if he could help it, and who always found a reason he had to help it. Dake knew him. Dake knew about Texas. Dake was not Miller, the fool deputy. Dake was a wolf, and he was not here by accident. He was here because Miller had gone back and told his story, and Dake, catching the scent of a $500 bounty, had picked up the trail. Holt did not run. He did not drop the wood. He just stood there, meeting the gaze of the man in the trees. He held it for a long, cold 10 seconds. He gave them nothing. Then, slowly, as if he had all the time in the world, as if they were not there, he turned his back on them. He gathered 2 more logs. He settled the load in his arms, and he began to walk back to the cabin. It was the longest 20 yards of his life. His back, the skin on his back crawled. He could feel the rifles. He could feel Dake's eyes, sighting down on the brand on his shoulder, right through the coat. Every step was an agony. He was waiting for the shot, the crack of the rifle, the heavy fist of the bullet. It would be so easy for them. A dry gulch shot, no witnesses. But the shot did not come. They were not here to kill him. Not yet. They were here for the woman. They were here to bargain. Or they were here to play. With Dake, it was always a game. He reached the cabin door, his hand clumsy with cold, fumbled with the latch. He pushed it open. He stepped inside, into the warm, dim light, into the smell of blood and birth and life. He did not slam the door. He closed it softly. He gently, quietly, dropped the latch bar into place. Holt? Clara's voice. It was weak, thin, but it was there. She was propped up on the cot. The tiny, dark-haired baby nestled in the crook of her arm, wrapped in the flour sack. The fire was burning low, the shadows long and deep. He looked at her, at the woman who had just been through hell, at the new, tiny life, the girl, his girl. He had cut the cord. He had brought her into this. He dumped the firewood by the hearth. His hands were shaking again, but not from cold, from a rage so pure and hot it threatened to choke him. "Holt, you're white as a sheet," Clara whispered. "What's wrong?" He went to the fire, stoked it, added 2 logs. The flames licked up. Hungry, he needed the light. He needed the warmth. He turned to her. He put his finger to his lips. "Quiet, not a sound. Do you understand?" Her eyes went wide. She knew. She had seen that look on his face once before, when Miller came. But this was worse. This was not caution. This was fear. "They're here," she breathed. "The deputy." "No." Holt's voice was a low rasp. He went to the window, peered through a crack in the mud, chinking. "Not Miller. It's worse. It's men from my old life. They're in the trees. 3 of them." He saw Clara's hand tighten on the baby. What do they want?" "You," he said, the word like a stone. "The bounty. And they want me. They know me." He moved, his exhaustion gone, replaced by a cold, desperate energy. "We have to go. We have to go now." "Go?" Clara looked around the cabin, at the raging fire, at the flimsy door. "Go where? Holt, the storm, the baby. She's barely an hour old. She'll die. We'll all die." "We'll die if we stay," he said, his voice flat. He was already grabbing things. He ripped the other blanket from his cot, the one she had mended. He wrapped it around her, over her shoulders. He grabbed the last of the cooked deer meat, shoving it into a sack. He grabbed his snowshoes. "Holt, no!" she wept, her voice breaking. "Please, we can't. Just give me up. It's me they want. Just let them have me. You take the baby, you take her and run. Please!" Holt stopped. He turned. He looked at her, his face a hard, unreadable mask in the firelight. "I'm not leaving you, and I'm not leaving her. We all go, or we all stay." He went to the floor, ripped up the loose board. He took out the Colt, checked the load, and shoved it deep into his belt. He did not hide it. Not anymore. He grabbed the long Springfield rifle from the wall. He checked its load. "Holt, you can't fight 3 of them," she sobbed. "I'm not gonna fight," he said. "I'm gonna run, but I ain't gonna run empty-handed." He went to her. He held out his arms. "Give her to me." "No." "Give her to me, Clara. I can keep her warm inside my coat." Trembling, she kissed the baby's head. She handed the small, warm bundle to him. Holt unbuttoned his heavy canvas coat, the one he had slept in, the one that smelled of pine smoke and sweat. He nestled the baby girl against his chest, against his wool shirt. She was so small. He buttoned the coat back up, a small, precious weight against his heart. He looked at Clara. "Can you walk?" She nodded, biting her lip, her face pale with pain and fear. I think so." "Don't think, just do." He slung the rifle over his shoulder. He grabbed the sack of meat. He looked at the cabin, the cot, the crib he had built. He looked at the blood on the floor from the birth. A home. For a few weeks. A tomb. If they stayed. "We go out the back," he whispered. "There's no window. They'll be watching the front. I cut a log loose in the back wall. In case it's a crawl space. We can get to the ridge." He helped her to her feet. She moaned, a low, animal sound of pain. Her legs were weak. She had lost blood, but she stood. He led her to the back wall. He pulled aside the pile of furs. There it was, a single log, cut through, held in place by 2 small wooden pegs. He pulled the pegs. He pushed the log. It fell outward, silent, into a deep snowdrift. A black, cold hole. "Me first," he whispered. He handed her the rifle. If they see me, you shoot. Don't aim, just shoot. Make 'em duck, then run." "Holt, just do it." He got on his belly. He protected the child with his body. He wormed his way through the hole, dropping into the deep, soft, freezing snow. The air was so cold it was like breathing glass. He stood. He was in the shadow of the cabin. He looked toward the trees. Nothing, no movement. They were still watching the front. He reached back in. "Clara, come on, now. Give me your hand." She crawled through, gasping as the snow hit her. He pulled her to her feet. She was shaking violently. "Don't stop," he whispered, his voice harsh. "Don't think about the cold. Don't think about the pain. Just think about her. Think about the baby. Walk. We go for the rocks." He pointed. 100 yards up the slope, a dark spine of granite, a place where the wind kept the snow shallow. He took her hand. He put his arm around her. She leaned on him. He was carrying her weight, and the baby, and the rifle, and the sack of food, and they ran. It was not running. It was a stumbling, agonizing wade through waist-deep snow. Every step was a nightmare. The snow was a trap, a heavy, wet blanket trying to pull them down. Clara fell. She went down on her knees, a sob tearing from her throat. "I can't, Holt, I can't. Leave me, please, leave me." He hauled her up. He did not speak. He just pulled her. He was a mule. He was a machine. He was a father. He would not stop. Behind them, a shout. "There, by the ridge, it's them!" A shot. The rifle crack was deafening in the silence. The bullet snapped through the air, whining past Holt's ear. So close he felt its wind. He threw Clara forward, into the snow. "Crawl! Just crawl!" He unslung the rifle. He did not aim. He just turned and fired. Once, twice, into the darkness of the trees. He was not trying to hit. He was trying to buy time. He saw muzzle flashes answer him. 2, 3. The men were dismounting, scrambling. "Run!" he roared. He grabbed Clara's arm and pulled her into the rocks. They found a space, a hollow, a shallow overhang. Barely a cave. just a ledge of black rock that kept the worst of the snow off. It was not much. It was not a cabin, but it was defensible. Holt pushed Clara into it. "Stay back! Stay down!" He lay at the mouth of the small shelter, the Springfield resting on a rock, his eyes scanning the white slope below. He could see them. 3 dark figures, spreading out, using the trees for cover. They were not rushing. They were hunters, and they had all night. For 2 days, they lived in that crack in the rock. It was a cold hell. They had no fire. A fire meant a bullet. Holt took the blanket he had wrapped Clara in, and he and Clara and the baby huddled under it, sharing their body heat. It was not enough. Clara was weak, too weak. She was pale, her lips tinged with blue. The blood she had lost, it was too much, but she did not complain. She just held the baby, unbuttoning her own shirt, putting the child to her breast. The baby was weak, too. Her cry was not the strong wail of the cabin. It was a thin, miserable sound, but she was nursing. She was alive. Holt did not sleep. He sat at the mouth of the cave, the rifle across his knees, and he watched. And he starved. He had the small sack of meat. He gave it all to Clara. "You have to eat," he said, his voice a rasp. "For her, for the milk. You eat or she dies." "Holt," she pleaded, trying to offer him a piece. You have no food. You haven't slept." "I ain't the one making milk," he said. He looked away, his gut cramping with a hunger that was so deep it was a constant, dull roar. He ate snow. It did not help. It just made him colder. He felt himself getting weak. His vision would blur. His hands, gripping the rifle, would shake. He would see the boy in Texas, his hands in the air. He would see Dake's face, leering at him from the trees. They were out there, waiting. They were patient. They knew the baby would cry. They knew the woman was weak. They knew Holt would have to make a move. They were just waiting them out. On the 3rd day, the hunger was a poison. Holt was lightheaded. He knew he was fading. He had to do something. And then he was gone. Clara woke from a fitful, freezing doze. The baby was quiet. Holt was not beside her. "Holt?" she whispered, panic seizing her. The rifle was gone. He was gone. She crawled to the mouth of the cave. She looked out, the white, empty world. He had left them. He had taken the gun and... No! She saw him, 50 yards down the slope, near a thicket of pine. He was kneeling, his back to her. He was checking a trap, a small snare he must have set in the dark. Relief washed over her, so strong it made her dizzy. He had not left. He was trying to find food. He stood up. He had something, a rabbit, small, but it was meat. And then a man stepped out from the trees. It was not a hidden man. He just appeared, big in a long duster, his hat pulled low. He was not holding a rifle. His hands were empty, held away from his sides. It was Dake. Holt froze. He had the rabbit in one hand, his knife in the other. His rifle was 10 feet away, leaning against a rock. Dake did not look at the rifle. He looked at Holt, and he smiled. Well, Holt, look at you. Sunk pretty low, ain't we? Snaring rabbits, living in a damn hole in the ground. Dake's voice was like his, a low gravel. But where Holt's was rough, Dake's was smooth, oiled. "Dake," Holt said. He did not move. "That's right." Dake took a step closer. Holt still didn't move. "Been a long time." "Holt, not since, what was it? Texas. Yeah, that messy business with the kid." Holt's hand tightened on his knife. "I heard about that," Dake said, his voice conversational. "Heard you put a bullet in a boy who'd surrendered. Nasty, even for you. Heard there's a warrant, not for bounty, for murder, a hang-in warrant. That's a hard thing to run from." Holt said nothing. "The boys." Dake Ed back to the trees. "They wanted to just start throwing lead, But I said, no, not Holt. Me and him were old friends. We understand each other. He stopped, just out of lunging distance. Here's the thing. Holt, I got a proposition. I'm a man of influence now. I got friends in Austin. Friends who listen. That warrant, that murder, it could disappear. Just poof. Gone. You could be a free man. You could walk into a town. Use your own name. No more looking over your shoulder. Holt stared at him. He knew. He knew what was coming. All you gotta do, Dake said, his smile widening, is give me the woman. Holt did not breathe. She's worth 500, Dake said. But she's also a problem. The deputy, Miller, he's a fool. But the men she stole from, they ain't her husband's family. They want her. They don't care about the 500. They just want her. They'll pay a lot more to the man who brings her in. She's innocent, Holt said, his voice dead. Dake laughed, a short, ugly sound. Innocent? Who the hell cares? You? Since when do you care about innocent? You, who shot a surrendering kid? Don't stand there and play saint with me. Holt, I know you. He took another step. Think about it, your whole life back. That thing in Texas erased? All for what? A woman who's gonna die up here anyway. And a baby? You got a baby in there? Lord, you are in a mess. Holt looked at the man. The temptation, it was not the money. It was the word. Erased. To have that day that one day wiped off the books. To not have to look over his shoulder. To be free. He could take the baby. He looked down at the rabbit in his hand. I'll think on it, Holt said, his voice a hoarse whisper. Dake's smile was triumphant. I knew you were smart. You got till sunup. You bring her out. We give you a horse, a clear name, and we all ride away rich. You don't well. We're gonna come in anyway. And then we take her. And we leave you and the kid for the wolves. Dake turned, his duster swirling, and walked back into the trees. He did not look back. He did not have to. He had set the hook. Holt stood there, his knees shaking. He picked up his rifle. He picked up the rabbit. He walked back to the cave. Clara had seen it. She had seen it all. She saw him come in, his face a mask of such anguish that it stopped her breath. He did not look at her. He just went to the back of the cave, sat down, and began to skin the rabbit with his knife. His hands were shaking so badly, he almost cut himself. She said nothing. She just watched him. That night, the cold was deeper than ever, but it was not the cold outside. It was the cold inside. Clara nursed the baby. Holt just sat, staring at the cave wall. He had not eaten. He had cooked the rabbit over a tiny, smokeless fire of dead twigs, and given it all to her. She waited until the baby was asleep. Then she crawled to him. He was sitting with his back to her, his head in his hands. He was shaking. He was crying. Not loud, a silent, awful weeping. His whole body, his huge, strong shoulders, were shaking with a grief that he had held in maybe for his whole life. She put her hand on his back. He flinched, but he did not pull away. I heard him, she whispered. The offer. He nodded, his face still in his hands. You're thinking on it, she said. It was not a question. It was a statement. She felt no anger, only a vast, terrible sadness. If I give you up, he choked out. His voice was a raw, broken thing she did not recognize. If I give you up that thing in Texas, it's gone. I won't be a murderer no more. Not in their eyes. I could hate myself less. He looked up at her. His face, in the faint moonlight, was a ruin. It was slick with tears. His eyes were full of a pain she could not even measure. But I'd die inside, he whispered. I'd be free, and I'd be dead. I'd be him. I'd be Dake. Clara looked at this man, this killer, this savior, this man who had built her a crib and who was now being offered a new life in exchange for hers. This man who was crying, not because he was afraid to die, but because he was afraid to live. She did not say, "It's all right." She did not say, "I understand." She knelt in front of him. She took his face, his rough, bearded, tear-stained face, in her two cold hands. And she kissed him. It was not a kiss of passion. It was not a kiss of desire. It was a kiss of desperation. It was comfort. It was connection. It was, "I see you. I am here. You are not him." It tasted of salt and snow and grief. He froze. He did not respond. He just let her kiss him, as if he did not know what it was. And then he did. He kissed her back. It was not a kiss. It was a drowning. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against him. He was a man dying of thirst, and she was water. He held her so tight she could barely breathe. He kissed her face, her eyes, her hair. His hands, his rough, scarred hands, were so gentle. They trembled. They made love. There, in the cold, on the hard rock, under the one thin blanket, with a baby sleeping beside them and 3 killers waiting in the trees. It was not love. It was something more basic. It was life, a confirmation of it. It was tender. It was halting. It was full of unsaid grief. It was clumsy and painful and desperate. It was 2 broken, scarred souls, clinging to each other in the dark, trying to find a single, warm place in a world that was frozen solid. After, they did not speak. They just lay there, huddled together, the baby between them, under the blanket, their breath plumed in the air. For the first time in 3 days, Holt slept. He woke just before dawn. The sky was a pale, sick gray. He looked at Clara. She was asleep, her face, even in exhaustion, peaceful for the first time. The baby was quiet. He had his answer. He slid out from under the blanket. He took the Colt pistol from his waistband. He looked at it, the thing that had brought him so much misery, the symbol of his old life. He went to the small, dead fire. He used his knife and he dug a hole in the frozen earth, right by the ashes. He laid the pistol in it. He covered it with dirt. He put the stones back. He looked at Clara. "No more blood," he whispered, to himself, to her, to the gun, to God. Not for money. He stood up and looked at the trees, his hands empty. But unless they touch her, he was done. He had made his choice. He would face Dake. He would face him with his bare hands if he had to. He woke Clara. It's time." She looked at him. She saw his empty belt. She saw the new turned earth by the fire. She saw the look in his eyes. It was not peace. It was resolve. She nodded. And then, from the canyon below them, a sound. Crack! A rifle shot, echoing, bouncing off the rock walls. It was not at them. It was a signal, or... Crack! 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 More shots, a flurry of them, shouting. Holt grabbed his rifle, scrambling to the mouth of the cave. He looked down. He saw them, Dake and his 2 men. They were not looking up at the cave. They were in the trees, in a defensive crouch, firing down the pass. "What is it?" Clara whispered, crawling up beside him. Holt's face was grim. "He's not closing in. He's being hunted." He saw more figures. Further down. Men on foot. Miller? No, more than that. It's a posse," Holt said. "A real one. From Elk Bluff. Dake must have crossed their trail. They're fighting each other." He looked at Clara. The choice it had been taken from him. It was not Dake he had to fear now. It was them, the law, the men who wanted her. Dake was just in the way. The canyon was suddenly terribly loud. The sharp crack of Dake's rifle was answered by the deeper boom of a dozen others. Bullets snapped and whined through the high, cold air, ricocheting off the granite walls with high-pitched screams. Men were shouting, their voices distant, angry. Holt lay flat at the mouth of the rock shelter, his rifle pushed out, watching the chaos below. Dake and his 2 men were trapped in the sparse line of trees, using their dead horses for cover. Below them, a strung-out line of at least 8, maybe 10, men were advancing through the snow. A posse. "He is not hunting," Holt breathed, the words lost in the gunfire. "He is hunted." Clara crawled beside him, her face a pale mask of terror. The newborn baby girl was stirring against her chest, frightened by the noise. "What is it? What is happening?" "It is them," Holt said, his voice grim. He did not take his eyes off the fight. "The men from Elk Bluff, Greeley's family, or men he paid for. They must have followed Miller. They found Dake's trail and thought it was ours." The situation was impossibly bad. They were caught between a wolf and a hangman's noose. If Dake's group was wiped out, the posse would sweep the canyon. They would find the cave. They would find her. If Dake somehow won, he would be wounded, angry, and he would come for the deal he had offered. There was no good outcome. Clara understood this. She looked at the men below, firing and yelling. They were not lawmen. They were a lynch mob. She grabbed Holt's arm. Her hand, though weak, was desperate. "Holt, you have to go." He looked at her, his expression hard to read. "Listen to me," she begged, the words coming in a rush. The baby started to fuss, a thin, mewling cry. "You have to take her. Just take the baby. You can run. You can move faster. They are not looking for a man alone. They are looking for me. I am just a wanted poster. She is new. She has not done anything." Her voice broke, a terrible, tearing sob. "I am a dead woman, Holt. I have been since I left Elk Bluff. But she is not. Please, you saved her. Do not let me be the one who kills her." Holt looked at her, at this woman who had survived so much, offering to be the bait. He looked at the tiny, wrinkled face of the baby girl, her mouth rooting against Clara's shirt. He had buried his past. He had made his choice in the dark, cold night. "No," he said. His voice was flat, final. "I told you, we all go, or we all stay." "But they will kill us." "They will try," Holt said. He looked back at the fight. Dake was a good shot. One of the posse members clutched his chest and fell backward into the snow. But they were outnumbered. It would not last long. He needed to stop all of them. His mind was working, the old, cold, hunter's mind. He could not fight 10 men. He could not fight Dake. But he was a trapper. He knew this land, and he knew a secret. "The cabin," he said, more to himself than to her. "What?" "The shed, behind the cabin." His eyes were distant, remembering. "When I was getting wood, I found it, an old crate. The trapper, he was not just a trapper, he was a prospector. Dynamite, sticks of it, oiled paper and fuse." Clara stared at him, not understanding. "The snow," he said, his gaze shifting, moving up, above the canyon, to the high ridge. The blizzard had left a cornice, a massive overhang of snow that balanced precariously over the gorge. It looked heavy, unstable. "If I can get them in the gorge," he whispered. "All of them." "Holt, that is madness. You cannot—" "It is the only way." He turned to her. This was the moment. "I have to go. I have to get it, and I have to lure them." He crawled to the back of the cave, to the small pile of rocks where they had made their tiny fire. He knelt. He dug his gloved hands into the frozen, ashy earth, where he had buried his past. He pulled the Colt Peacemaker out. It was cold, the steel dark and heavy. He did not look at it as a sin. He looked at it as a tool. He crawled back to Clara. He pushed the heavy pistol into her hand, her good hand. "What? No, I cannot." "Yes, you can," he said, his voice hard. "I taught you. You remember. 2 hands. Squeeze. Keep your eyes open. This is in case I do not make it. If any of them get past me, you do not let them take her. You understand me, Clara." She looked at the gun. She looked at his face, his eyes full of a terrible resolve. She nodded, her hand closing around the walnut grip. 2 hands, she whispered. "Squeeze." "Good." He took one last look at her. At the baby. He wanted to touch them. He did not. There was no time. He grabbed his rifle. "Feed the baby. Keep her quiet. Keep her warm. Do not move. Do not make a sound until it is done." He slipped out of the cave. Not down toward the fight, but up the back of the ridge, moving like a ghost in the snow, using the boulders and stunted pines for cover. His body was weak. The hunger was a living thing inside him, a cold animal gnawing at his gut. His legs shook with every step, but his mind was clear. He was a hunter again. He circled wide, high above the firefight. He could see it all from here. Dake's men were pinned. The posse was getting braver, moving closer. Holt moved faster. He reached the clearing. The burned-out shell of the cabin was just a black square in the snow. The shed, miraculously, was untouched. He kicked the rotting door in. There it was, the crate! He smashed the lid open. 5 sticks of dynamite, dry in their oiled paper. A coil of fuse, caps. He took it all. He worked fast. He bundled the sticks together. He inserted the cap, crimped it with his teeth. He measured out a long piece of fuse, enough to give him time. He shoved the bundle deep into his coat. He kept his flint and steel in his pocket. Ready. Now, the bait! He had to get them all. Dake, the posse, he had to pull them together. He moved to the head of the gorge, the narrow pass that led up toward the high country. He found his spot, a rocky outcropping, high above the trail, directly under the massive snow cornice. He planted the dynamite, shoving it deep into a crevice in the rock, paying out the fuse, hiding it in the snow. He was ready. He looked down. The fight was sporadic now. Dake was running low on ammunition. The posse was gathering for a final rush. Holt stood up. He made himself visible on the ridge, a single dark figure against the white sky. He raised his rifle and fired, but not at the posse, and not at Dake. He fired into the air, a single echoing shot that cut through all the others. The shooting below stopped. Every man, from both sides, looked up. They saw him. "It is him," a voice from the posse roared. "It is the bounty hunter. The woman must be with him. Get him!" Dake saw him too. He saw Holt, and he saw the posse turn. He saw his chance. "He is running!" Dake bellowed to his 2 remaining men. "He is getting away! After him! He will lead us right to her!" It was a race. Dake's men scrambled from their cover. The posse surged forward. They all forgot each other. They only saw the prize, the man on the ridge, fleeing into the gorge. "Come on," Holt whispered, his heart hammering. "Come on, you fools." He scrambled back, keeping himself visible just long enough. He saw them enter the pass. Dake's men in the lead, the posse right behind them. They were all in the trap, a long, strung-out line of men and horses, all looking up, all charging. Holt ran to his fuse. He knelt. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the cold and the hunger. He struck the flint. A spark. Nothing. He struck it again. The spark caught the tinder. He blew on it. A tiny flame. He touched it to the fuse. It sputtered. It hissed. It caught. A thin line of gray smoke, disappearing into the snow. "Run," he breathed. He did not run. He crawled. He clawed his way up the rock face, away from the charge, onto the stable ground above. He lay flat, his face pressed into the freezing snow, and he waited. It took 10 seconds. It felt like 10 years. First, a sound, not a bang, a deep, heavy thump, like a giant heartbeat, deep in the mountain. Then, A crack. A sound louder than any rifle. It was the sound of the world breaking. Holt looked up. The whole ridge above the gorge, it was moving. The massive white cornice. 1,000 tons of snow and ice. Shivered. It leaned. It hung there, suspended for a single, silent second. And then it fell. It did not fall like snow. It fell like a building. A white, roaring wall. A solid ocean of ice and powder, thundering down into the narrow gorge. The men below, they heard it. They looked up. Holt saw their faces. Even from this distance, pale circles of terror. They had no time to run. They had no time to scream. The avalanche hit them. The roar was deafening. It was the sound of a mountain dying. The ground shook. A cloud of ice powder exploded upward, blotting out the sun, rising 1,000 feet into the air. And then silence. A silence more complete, more terrible than any before. The gorge was gone. It was just a flat, white, churning river of snow, settling. There were no men. There were no horses. There was nothing. It was over. He had done it. He had killed them all. Holt lay in the snow, his body shaking with relief and exhaustion. He had won. He had saved them. He got to his feet. He was dizzy. He needed to get back to Clara. He stumbled, grabbing his rifle, and started the long walk back around the ridge, toward the cave. The silence was eerie. The only sound was the crunch of his own boots. He felt empty. He had just killed 10, 12 men. He had buried them under a mountain. He felt no remorse. He felt no pride. He just felt tired. He came around the last bend of rock, his eyes fixed on the dark slash of the cave opening. "Clara!" he called out, his voice hoarse. "It is done. We are—" "Holt, do not move!" The voice. It was not Clara. It was Dake. Holt froze. The voice had come from the cave, from inside the cave. Slowly, Holt turned. Morgan Dake stepped out from the rock shelter. He was not smiling. His face was a mask of cold, triumphant rage. And he was not alone. He had his left arm wrapped around Clara's neck, using her as a shield. In his right hand, he held his pistol, the barrel pressed hard against her temple. Clara was weeping, her face sheet white with terror. In her good arm, the one not pinned by Dake, she was clutching the baby girl, who was wailing, a high, thin sound of panic. "How?" Holt breathed. "You are not the only one who knows this mountain." Dake sneered. "While you were playing with your toys, I did some hunting of my own. I was not in the gorge. I was flanking. I saw you. I saw you running for the cabin. I knew you had them stashed. I followed your tracks back. Easy as you please." Holt looked at Dake. He looked at Clara. He looked at the baby. His rifle was in his hands, but it was useless. Dake was using her as a shield. "You killed my men, Holt," Dake whispered, his voice shaking with fury. "You killed my payday. That posse, they were worth something, dead or alive. You cost me everything." "Let her go, Dake," Holt said, his voice low. "It is me you want." "It was you I wanted. It was her I wanted. Now I just want to watch you suffer." DKE pressed the gun harder. "Drop the rifle." Holt did not move. "I said, drop it, or I swear I will put a bullet through her eye, right here, and then the baby. Drop it." Slowly, his heart a cold stone in his chest. Holt bent down. He laid the Springfield rifle in the snow at his feet. "Now kick it, over here, far." Holt kicked it. The rifle slid across the ice, stopping near Dake's feet. "Hands up, high, now, walk slow." Holt raised his hands. He took a step. He had one chance. The skinning knife, it was still in his boot. He had not taken it out. He took another step. He was 10 feet away, 5 feet. He stood before them, helpless, A disarmed man. Dake laughed. It was a horrible, broken sound. Look at you, the great Holt, the man who shoots boys with their hands up. Look at you now. You are not so big. You are just a man. Dake was enjoying this. He was drawing it out. You know, Dake mused. I was going to clear your name. I really was. A man like you could have been useful. But you found a conscience. You found this. He shoved Clara, making her stumble. You traded your whole life for this, a used-up woman, and this. With the barrel of his pistol, he nudged the baby, who had quieted, let out a fresh wail of terror. Dake had touched her. What do you think, Holt? Dake sneered, his face alive with cruelty. Should I kill this one first, the little one? Make her quiet, or make you watch her freeze after you are gone? He was not looking at Holt's face. He was looking at the baby. He was savoring the moment. It was the last mistake he ever made. Holt did not think. He moved. The line, unless they touch her, was a roar in his head. He lunged. He did not go for the gun. He went for Dake. He crashed into them, a single violent motion. He drove his shoulder into Dake's chest, shoving him off balance. He ignored the gun, which was still pressed to Clara's head. He had one move. His right hand, the one that was high in the air, dropped. It dropped to his boot. He grabbed the handle of the skinning knife. Dake was falling backward, trying to keep his grip on Clara, trying to bring the gun to bear on Holt. Holt drove the knife upward. He did not aim for the chest. He aimed for the leg. He put all his weight, all his rage, all his fear into that one single upward thrust. He buried the 6-inch blade to the hilt in Dake's right thigh. Dake screamed. It was not a yell. It was a high, thin, animal shriek of pure agony. His body convulsed. His arm, the one holding Clara, spasmed. His fingers opened. His other hand, the one with the gun, fired. A deafening bang. The shot went wild. It was not aimed. It was a reflex. Clara screamed, a new sound of pain. She was free. She stumbled back, falling into the snow. The stray bullet. It had caught her. It had ripped through the flesh of her left shoulder. Holt did not go for Dake. He did not go for the knife. He went for Clara. Clara, are you? He scrambled to her, shielding her with his body. Dake was on the ground, his leg a ruin of blood. He was roaring, trying to pull the knife out, but he was not beaten. He was raising his pistol, his hands shaking, trying to get a shot at Holt's back. Holt! Clara screamed. She was on her back in the snow, her shoulder bleeding. The baby was safe, clutched to her chest. But in her other hand, her right hand, was the Colt. She had held onto it. She raised it. Her hand was shaking. Just like the first time. The gun was so heavy, her shoulder was on fire. Dake was leveling his pistol. She thought of Holt. Keep your eyes open. She forced them open. She saw Dake's face, twisted in a mask of hate. She put her other hand under the gun, just as he had taught her. 2 hands. She squeezed. The explosion was huge, the recoil slamming her back into the snow. Dake, he just stopped. He looked surprised. His arm, the one holding the gun, went limp. He looked down, a small, dark, growing circle in the center of his chest. He looked at Clara. He tried to say something. He fell sideways into the snow and did not move. Silence. The baby was screaming. Holt was panting, his ears ringing. He looked at Dake. He looked at Clara, who was sobbing, the heavy Colt still smoking in her trembling hands. It was over. For real, this time. He crawled to her. Clara, you are. He ripped her sleeve. The wound. It was high. Through the shoulder. It was bleeding badly, but it was clean. It was a flesh wound. You are all right, he breathed. a sob of relief catching in his throat. "It missed the bone. You are all right." I killed him," she whispered, her eyes wide with shock. "Holt, I killed him." Holt gently took the pistol from her hands. He looked at her, at this woman who had just saved his life. "No," he said, his voice soft. "You saved ours." He stood up. He was weak. His legs were shaking. He looked at the dead man. He looked at the buried gorge. He looked at Clara. "More will come," he said, his voice flat. They always send more. The men who hired Dake, Greeley's family, they will not stop." He went to Dake's body. He did not want to leave him for the wolves. He dragged the heavy body to a deep crevice in the rock, rolled it in, and covered it with stones and snow, a hunter's grave. "We have to go," he said. "Back to the cabin. We need supplies. We need to go. Now." They stumbled back. It took an hour. Clara was leaning on him, her arm in a crude sling Holt made from his scarf. She held the baby against her good side. The cabin was quiet, cold. The fire was dead. Holt found them, on the table, the wanted posters Miller had left. "Clara Greeley, murder, $500. He looked at the crude drawing. He looked at the woman beside him, bleeding, exhausted, but alive. He crumpled the paper in his fist. He went to the hearth. He took the poster. He took the small, perfect crib he had built. He took the old, broken chair. He took everything that tied them to this place, this life, this death. He built a pile in the center of the room. "Holt, we are erasing it," he said. He took his flint and steel. He lit the pile, the dry wood, the paper. It caught fast. Flames licked up, catching the walls. "We burn it. We burn it all." He went outside, helped her out. They stood in the snow and watched the cabin burn. It had been their shelter, their prison, the place their child was born. Now it was a pyre. It was the only warmth for miles. Where do we go?" Clara whispered, her voice lost in the crackle of the flames. Holt looked at the fire, at the smoke rising in the cold. Clear air. He looked at the snow, covering the dead. Then he looked west. The sun was low, turning the distant, endless peaks a shade of purple and orange. "Oregon," he said. I heard a man can get lost there. A man can start over." He found Dake's horse, the only one that had survived. It was grazing nervously by the trees. He led it over. He helped Clara onto the saddle. She was weak, but she held on. He wrapped the last blanket around her. He gently, so gently, handed her the baby girl. He took the rifle. He took the one small sack of food Dake had left on his saddle. He put his hand on Clara's knee. He looked up at her, at the baby, his family. He turned west, and he began to walk, leading the horse, his hand never leaving her. 2 ghosts and a new life, walking away from the fire, leaving nothing behind but smoke and bodies. The journey west was a new kind of hell. It was not the sharp, sudden violence of the cabin, but a long, slow, grinding trial. They left Wyoming, a smoking ruin at their backs, and pushed the horse, the one that had belonged to Dake, until it could barely stand. Clara's shoulder was a constant, throbbing pain. The wound was clean, but it was deep. Holt tended to it with a grim efficiency, washing it with melted snow, binding it with strips of cloth torn from Dake's own saddlebags. They had the baby, a tiny, silent traveler who rarely cried. It was as if she knew, from her first breath, that the world was a place that demanded silence. They crossed the high, brutal spine of the continent. They moved through deserts of salt and alkali, their lips cracking, their eyes burning. Holt walked. He walked until his boots were thin, until the soles were just layers of leather, tied on with rawhide. He hunted. He snared rabbits, grouse. He begged for food at a far-flung, lonely trading post, trading Dake's rifle for a bag of flour, a side of bacon, and 2 pairs of thick wool socks. He kept only the Colt, Clara's gun. Clara, weak from blood loss, just held on. She held the horse, and she held the baby. Her world shrank to that small, warm bundle. She nursed the child, giving her the last of her strength. Holt, in turn, fed Clara. He would chew the tough, stringy rabbit meat until it was soft, and feed it to her, just as one would feed a child. They were not Holt and Clara. They were nothing. Just 2 shadows, moving west, always west, toward the one place they had not yet ruined, the ocean. It took months. They came down out of the Blue Mountains, into the damp, green-smelling air of Oregon. It was a new world. The air was soft. It was wet. It did not try to kill you with every breath. They found the logging camp. It was a scar on the side of a mountain, near the coast. A rough town of sawdust, mud, and giant, felled trees. It was a place for men who did not want to be found. Men with no pasts, or men with too many. They gave new names. Amos, he said, Amos Smith. This was his wife, Sarah. This was their baby girl. They had a name for her now, a name Clara had whispered one night, while Holt was asleep. Hope. The camp took them in. Strangers were just part of the landscape. Amos Holt was strong. He could swing an axe. He was quiet. He drank no whiskey. He did not gamble. He just worked. He went out before dawn, into the mists that rolled off the Pacific, and the sound of his axe hitting the giant spruce and fir was the only voice he had. He was a good logger. He worked until his hands were raw, until his muscles burned so badly he could not feel the old, deep ache of the hunger. He worked to exhaust the ghosts. Clara, Sarah, found work. 2. The camp cook, a one-eyed man named Sal, needed help. There were 50 men, and they ate like animals. Clara baked. She had a touch with the flour, the lard, the molasses. She made bread that was not full of rocks. She made pies. The loggers, rough men with scarred knuckles and hard eyes, were gentle with her. They called her Mrs. Smith. They tipped their hats. They brought her small, sweet wild berries they found. They would peek at the baby. Hope, who slept in her cradle, a strong, new one Holt had built by the warm, massive ovens. They had a life. It was a hard life, a poor life, a life in a small, damp cabin that smelled of pine sap and mildew. But it was a life. And the baby Hope, she learned to smile. She would see Holt, his face grim, his beard catted with sawdust, and her face would break open in a wide, toothless grin. And Holt, a man who had not smiled in 30 years, he would find his own face breaking. He would find a strange, aching warmth in his chest. He would pick her up, his massive, scarred hands engulfing her, and he would hold her to his face and breathe in the smell of her. Milk and wood smoke and newness. It looked like peace. It looked like they had made it. They had run to the edge of the continent, and the past had finally let them go. But the past was not gone. It was just quiet. Holt could not sleep. He would lie on their straw mattress. In the dark, the sound of the ocean, a low, constant roar in the distance. It was not like the wind in the mountains. The wind had been a threat. The ocean was a memory. It ground and turned, just like his mind. He would lie there, rigid, pretending to be asleep. But Clara knew. She could feel the heat and the tension radiating off him. He would wait until he thought she was sleeping, and then he would slide out of the bed, his movements silent, just as they had been in the old cabin. He would go outside, without his shirt, and stand in the cold, damp, salty air. He would stare, not at the ocean, but back east. The nightmares were worse now, worse than they had been in Wyoming, because here, he was safe, and safety was a terror all its own. He would dream of the boy, always the boy, hands in the air, crying, and Holt would pull the trigger, and the boy's face, sometimes it was the boy, sometimes it was Dake, sometimes it was Hope. He would wake with a gasp, his hands strangling the blanket. But mostly, he dreamed of the birth. He dreamed of the cabin, the roaring storm. He dreamed of Clara, screaming his name, her face a mask of terror. And he dreamed of himself, standing there, useless, frozen, paralyzed by the blood, by the screaming, by the memory of the boy. He dreamed of that one terrible, endless moment when he was not a savior. He was not a killer. He was nothing. He was just a coward who had let the world in. He would stand outside until the cold seeped into his bones, until he was shaking. He would come back in and find Clara, awake, watching him from the bed. He would not look at her. He would just lie down and stare at the ceiling and wait for the dawn and the blessed numbing work of the axe. Clara watched this. She saw the man who had pulled them from the snow, the man who had faced down Dake, being eaten from the inside out. He was here, but he was gone. One night, he came in, shaking, his face wet with the fog. He sat on the small stool by the cold hearth, his head in his hands. He did not go to bed. Clara got up. The baby was asleep in the cradle. She lit the lamp, the small cabin filled with a low, yellow light. She did not go to him. She just stood by the table. "You are not here, Amos," she said, using the name they had chosen. You are still in Wyoming. You are still in that cave." He did not look up. His shoulders were bowed. "Leave it be, Sarah." "I will not," she said. Her voice was not hard. It was soft, but it was strong. She had killed a man. She was not afraid of shadows anymore. "You have to come back," she said. We need you. Hope needs her father. I need my husband." He flinched at the word, husband. I am not," he whispered, his voice broken. You should have left me. You should have. I am a poison." She walked over to him. She knelt in front of him, just as she had done in the cave. She put her hand on his knee. "No, you are not." She took a breath. "You did something horrifying that day, in the cabin." He tensed. His head snapped up. His eyes were wide, haunted. He thought of the avalanche, the dozen men he had buried. I did." "No," she said, shaking her head. She saw where his mind went. "Not the gorge. I do not care about them. They were coming to kill us. Dake." "I killed Dake," she said, her voice flat. "That is on my soul, not yours." "Then what?" he whispered. The birth?" "Yes." She looked him right in the eye. When Hope was born, you lifted that knife." "I had to," he stammered. "The cord, I know." Her voice was soft. "I know that now. But in that moment, after all the blood, after you had told me about the boy, I saw you lift that blade. And I thought for 1 second, I thought you were going to silence us, to clean up the mess. My heart stopped." Holt closed his eyes. The pain on his face was terrible. "Clara, I would never—" "I know," she said, squeezing his knee. "But that was not the most horrifying part." He looked at her, confused. "Before that," she said, her voice dropping, You hesitated. When she was born, when she was silent, you froze. I screamed your name. I screamed for you, and you were not there. You were lost. Your eyes, they were 1,000 miles away. You were gone." She was crying now, silent tears rolling down her face. That was the most horrifying moment of my life. Not Dake, not the posse, not the blizzard. The moment I knew you were gone, and I was alone." Holt looked at her, his own tears welling. I was," he breathed. I was in Texas. I saw the boy. I saw the blood. I was afraid." "I know," she whispered. "But then you heard me. You came back. You did not run. You did not stay frozen. You came back. You grabbed the knife. You cut the cord. You put her in my arms. You saved us." She leaned forward, her forehead resting against his. "You were lost, but you came back. That is all that matters." He looked at her. He looked at this woman. She had seen the absolute worst of him, his weakness, his paralysis, his shame. And she was not disgusted. She was grateful. He pulled her to him, his arms wrapping around her, and he held her. "Clara," he choked out, his voice thick. If it meant keeping you safe, keeping her safe, I would do worse. I would burn the world down." She wept against his chest. She was not afraid. She had never heard words of such terrible, powerful love. She had never known that a man could hold her, not to possess her, not to hurt her, but to protect her, to anchor her. She wept from a relief so deep it felt like it was pulling her apart. The peace lasted for 2 weeks. Holt, he was different. He was present. He still did not sleep well, but when he woke, he would reach for her. He would hold her hand. He would look at Hope, not with fear, but with a kind of wonder. Then the man came. It was a day like any other. The air was wet. The sound of the saws and axes filled the camp. Clara was by the ovens, her hands covered in flour. Hope was in her cradle. A stranger rode in. He was not a logger. He was not a trapper. He wore a fine, dark, Eastern suit. It was stained with mud and travel. He rode a good horse, but it was lathered and near exhaustion. He had a clean-shaven face, but his eyes were burning. They were blue and cold and full of a terrible, righteous fire. He did not go to the foreman. He did not go to the saloon. He dismounted, his movements stiff. He walked through the camp, his eyes scanning every face. Holt was at the edge of the camp, splitting wood for their cabin. His back was to the man. The man stopped. He watched Holt for a long, silent minute. "They called you Holt," the man said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the sound of the camp. "In Wyoming. Before that, in Texas. But here you are, Amos Smith." Holt froze, the axe in his hands, mid-swing. He did not turn. He knew it was over. The past had had a long reach. Slowly, Holt set the axe down. He turned. The man was standing 20 feet away. He looked familiar. He had Jonas Greeley's thin lips, his pale, cold eyes. "Jonas Greeley was my brother," the man said. "The whole camp, the loggers, they had gone quiet. They were watching." Holt just nodded. He was so tired. He was so tired of running. "I am Elias Greeley," the man said. I have tracked you across 3 states. I have followed the trail of fire and death you left. I found the ashes of the cabin. I found the grave of Morgan Dake. I talked to the deputy, Miller." He took a step closer. His hand was on the butt of the pistol, holstered on his hip. It was a new, fine-looking gun. He said you were with her, the harlot, the killer, the one who poisoned my blood." "She did not," Holt said. His voice was quiet, flat. "Liar!" Elias screamed. The word was a tear in the air. She ruined him. She took his name, his money, and then his life. And you helped her." "That is right," Holt said. "I helped her." I want her," Elias said, his voice shaking with a rage that was bordering on madness. "I want her. I want my brother's justice." Holt looked at this man who had come so far, driven by a lie. He looked at his own cabin, just 50 yards away. He could hear Hope fussing. Clara would be terrified. Holt took a step forward, away from his cabin. He put his hands out, palms up, empty. "She is not here," Holt lied. She died, in the snow. Her and the baby." Elias stared at him. You are lying." "No," Holt said. "She is gone, so it is just me. You want revenge. You want justice for your brother. Here I am. He took another step. I am the one. I killed Dake. I killed those men. It was all me. You can take me in. Or you can do what you came to do. Right here. But you let the camp go. You let it be. Holt was offering himself. His life. He was surrendering. Just like the boy, he was putting his hands up. Elias looked at him. At this big, scarred, exhausted man. Offering himself. Elias laughed. It was a cold, brittle sound. You think you can just trade? You think your worthless life pays for his? He spat on the ground. You do not get to choose. He pulled his gun. He cocked the hammer. The click-click was the loudest sound in the world. I will send you to hell, Elias whispered. And then I will find where you buried her. He raised the pistol. He aimed it, with 2 hands, at Holt's chest. No. The voice was not Holt's. It was Clara's. She was standing on the porch of their cabin. She was not hiding. She was not running. She was holding Hope in her arms. Elias Greeley froze. He stared. He could not believe it. She was alive. The baby alive. Sarah, no, Holt breathed. Go back inside. Run! Clara ignored him. She looked at Elias. She held the baby, Hope, tightly, and she began to walk. She walked, not to Holt, but toward Elias, toward the gun. Stop! Elias screamed. Stop, or I will! She kept walking. She stopped when she was right between them. She was standing between the barrel of the gun and Holt's chest. She had done it again. She was his shield. You want justice? She said. Her voice was shaking, but not with fear, with a strength that was older than the mountains they had crossed. Elias stared at her, his finger trembling on the trigger. Move, you witch! No, Clara said. You came all this way. You want justice for your brother. You want to know what happened. She looked at Holt, at this man, who had offered to die for her. Then she looked back at Elias. He already gave it, she said. Her voice was clear, ringing through the silent camp. Elias just stared, confused. What? Justice, Clara said. She held Hope up, just a bit. He gave it to me and to her. Your brother, he was a monster. He hurt me. He would have killed her. This man, Holt, he saved us. He gave me a life. He gave her a life. That is justice. The real justice, the kind God gives, not the kind men like you want. Elias looked at her. He looked at her face. It was not the face of a killer. It was the face of a mother. It was the face of a survivor. He looked at the baby, a tiny, perfect, innocent child, staring at him. He looked at Holt, standing there, his hands still empty, willing to die for them. His whole world, his righteous quest, it was built on the word of his sister. Mildred, it was built on a lie. He was not the hero. He was not the avenger. He was the monster. His hands, holding the gun, they began to shake. He looked at Clara. He looked at Holt. He looked at the baby. He could not. He let out a sound, a low, agonizing sound, a sound of a man whose whole world had just been burned to the ground. He lowered the gun. He did not speak. He did not look at them again. He turned. He walked to his horse. He put the gun back in its holster. He climbed up, his movement stiff, like an old man. He rode out of the camp. He did not look back. He just rode, back east, back to the life he had left, a man broken by the truth. Holt and Clara stood there, in the mud, among the loggers. The baby, Hope, made a small, happy sound. It was over. That night, they were not at the camp. Holt took her and the baby, and they walked. They walked down the trail, out of the forest, and onto the beach. The ocean was huge, a vast, gray, roaring thing, stretching out forever. The sun was gone, leaving a streak of blood red on the horizon. It was the end of the world. Holt built a fire, not a small, smokeless fire of fear, a real fire of driftwood, big and bright, pushing back the cold, salty dark. They sat on a log. The baby, wrapped in a blanket, was asleep between them. They sat in silence for an hour, just watching the waves, listening to the sound of the world ending and beginning again. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, his good shoulder. I still cannot hold it in, she whispered. Holt tensed. He thought of the cabin, the pain. He thought she was hurt. What is it, Clara? She turned her face, looking up at him. Her eyes, in the firelight, were full of the ocean. I love you too much. Holdy looked at her. He had never heard those words, not from anyone, not in his whole ruined life. He looked at her, the woman who had seen his weakness, his shame, his rage, the woman who had killed for him, the woman who had stood between him and a gun. He had to say it, the last, final ghost. He had to let it go. I love you too, Clara, he said. The words were rough, unused. They felt strange in his mouth, but they were true. They were the truest thing he had ever said. He kissed her, not with the desperation of the cave, not with the grief of the wild. He kissed her like a husband, and they held each other. They just held on, the wind howling off the ocean, the fire crackling at their feet, the baby safe between them. Two lost, scarred, broken souls who had run all the way to the end of the world, only to find the one thing, the only thing, worth surviving for. Thank you for listening to this story. We would love to hear your thoughts, so please comment where you are listening from to connect with others. Do not forget to subscribe to the Wild West Campfire channel and share your thoughts.